You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, today we have a very special episode for you. We are going to be speaking with the author of Freelance to Freedom. I am unbelievably excited about this because I have read this book cover to cover and it blew my mind. This was the most relatable, actionable book that I have read in the last several years. I mean, this is something that you're going to have on your shelf, like The Simple Path to Wealth, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This is one of those must-read books. So excited to get a chance to bring Vincent Pugliese on the show to actually talk through his backstory, what inspired him to actually put this together. I think you're going to get so much value from his decision tree and the fact that he is not an overnight success. In fact, his story is riddled with failure. You're going to love this and you're going to absolutely get value from this episode. So to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today.
Hey, Jonathan. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I actually got introduced to Vincent through a podcast that I listened to called The Good Dad Project. He's been a guest on there, I think a couple times at least, and he's very active in their Facebook forum and just the most helpful guy. I reached out to him and we just became friendly. And I think he sent me his book a while back, or at least a draft of it. And we had the good fortune to meet Vincent at FinCon and luckily booked this podcast. And yeah, it should be a really, really good conversation. I know, Jonathan, when you read through his book, you said to me instantly, this is going to be a New York Times bestseller. And you just loved it. So with that, Vincent, welcome to the show.
And that is a lot to live up to right there. Let's go.
All right. This is something that I'm very excited about. And what I loved about your story is it was raw, man. I mean, you are sharing your natural decision tree, which when you track it, it totally makes sense. But it is not this, you decided to start a company with a skill set that no one else possesses because you're this incredibly talented guy. And obviously you became a tech millionaire or billionaire. Rather, it's the real story of what you go through when you decide to take something on that is so far outside of your comfort zone and be willing to make mistakes until it works.
Yeah, it's funny because it was never a book in my mind. And even when I wrote it 2 years ago today, like almost today, we were on vacation with my wife and we have 3 boys. And I'd been talking about this book because people started asking kind of like, how have you done this? Like, how are you able to just take like a month-long vacation or, work when you want to work and all, financial freedom and all that type of stuff. And I took notes for about 3 years. And that's what you read. It was notes and stories that I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd just have to write that before I forgot it. We were going to the beach. We were in Corpus Christi, Texas. Elizabeth said to me, she goes, okay. She goes, I'm taking the kids to the beach. She goes, I want you to go to the coffee shop. I want you to start writing the book. I'm so tired of you talking about it. Just go write the book. That's how it started in terms of even writing it. Because I didn't think anybody would want to read it. I'll be dead honest. I didn't think anybody would want, like, who am I? And I think a lot of us have that. Like, who am I to do this? Who am I to write a book? I think it was raw because I never planned on anybody reading it. Like I knew my mom would read it and my wife would read it. So I was able to kind of just write it out. And once it was getting near the end, I was very happy with the way the story was portrayed. It wasn't, like you said, it wasn't get rich quick. It wasn't this hack. It wasn't a funnel that worked that all of a sudden, I'm living on the beach and doing whatever I want to do. It's like, this is what it's really like to go through this. And I think so many people want it so quick that they don't deal with the struggles that come with it. And we all have those struggles.
Well, let's take you back to this moment at the age of 22 where you're screaming basically at your dad, what am I doing with my life? Can you walk us through a little bit of your backstory and what gets you to this point where you have this meltdown?
Yeah. I was a thief. I was a terrible student. I learned that I was going to graduate from high school on the day before graduation. I still remember a friend of mine when everybody was planning their college. I was in Long Island, New York. Everybody was like going to the Ivy Leagues or they were going to the Brown and here and there. And I had nothing. And I was just hanging out with my friends. I remember a friend saying, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but I'll figure something out. And he looked at me like I was just an alien. And I still remember feeling like I really believed that. This is not what I want to do, like what they're telling me in school. I knew that wasn't it. When I was with my guidance counselor and she asked me what I wanted to do with my life, I told her, I don't know, but I know I don't want to wear a tie. I just don't want to go to work and wear a tie all day. She just like basically kicked me out of her office. I was a lost cause to them. But that happened for about 5 years. I had about 12 different jobs. I got arrested for stealing from a job that I was at. I was stealing from another job that I was at. I had no morals, no scruples. And I had a nightmare that I got caught stealing at this job. It was a convenience store where I served customers, and we would all like overcharge the customers. It was really just a terrible thing. But it was like $1 here, $2 there, and we didn't think anything of it. Didn't think about what it was doing to us as people. And I woke up in the middle of the night, 2:00 in the morning, in the dead sweat, and I basically just said, "What?" I had a nightmare that this woman caught me, and I jumped out of bed, and I went downstairs and I just sat at the kitchen table and I was like, "What am I doing with my life? Like, what has happened? I'm 22. I work at a convenience store. I'm a thief." And my dad came downstairs, and I didn't get along with my dad for, he had a financial collapse when I was 15. We didn't get along since then. I didn't go to college, went to community college. And I told him, I said, "I don't know what I'm doing with my life." And he looked at me and he said, really simply, he goes, "Well, you like traveling, you like taking pictures." I had a point and shoot camera. And he goes, "You like sports. Why don't you take a photography class?" And I was like, "It sounds awesome." I said, "I don't know anything about photography, and I know I'm going to fail because I failed at everything that I've ever done, but at least I'm going to fail at something cool." And I went and I bought a camera the next day. And that literally was one of the 2 moments that just changed my life. Because from that point on, I had a focus and I changed all my ways. And that just completely started a new life that night.
Why do you think that this stuck when it seems to me like the history based on what you shared in your book is that you gave up every other thing that you tried? I mean, didn't you burn through like 5 degrees?
Yeah, everything. I literally got arrested while I was studying criminal justice. That's how I learned.
Wow.
Yeah. And handcuffed and taken out in front of employees. I mean, the whole gamut. Why did that stick? Because it's kind of what I tell people now is people change when they're ready to change. Like, I don't try to convince anybody. You can't help somebody that doesn't want to be helped. And I didn't want to be helped. I thought I had it. I was 21. I had a cute girlfriend. I had some money in my pocket. I couldn't be told anything at that point. So I've learned I can't tell those people anything, but I can tell somebody that wants to hear it. So at that point, I was ready to hear it. I'm sure he gave me a ton of great advice over the previous 5 years. I just didn't listen to it.
Vincent, have you ever thought back to how supportive your dad was there? If you really think about it, right? You're 22, seemingly, you're describing it as you're a thief, you've burned through things, you have no idea what you're doing, and your dad is still constructive and gives you this idea of, hey, go take a photography class. That seems pretty incredibly supportive to me.
It's both. He probably wanted me out of the house at the same time. I had moved back in. It was fantastic. And the amazing thing about it was me and my dad did not get along up until about 5 years ago. But when I started writing this book, and this is really the power of this, whether it's book sales or anything that comes with it, writing your story out. Because when I first started writing this book, to be totally honest, I was mad. I was mad because I had done this stuff and I had become successful. And there were so many people that I saw that didn't help me or support me. And it was kind of almost like thumbing my nose at the system. Like, yeah, I could do this. And as I started writing the story, and my dad was one of them, to be dead honest, we didn't get along that well. And when I started writing the stories, that story when I was 22, I remembered that and I started writing it. And then I wrote the story that happened 10 years later when he helped us start our own business. And those 2 stories were the cornerstone of this book in our life. And up until that point that I started writing, I didn't appreciate him for it. I saw the things that I think I didn't get at that point. I have an older brother, and I kind of was like, oh, he gets treated better. We were oil and water, me and my parents. So I was always resentful about that. And it wasn't until I wrote this that started changing. I started seeing my dad differently. And this is really in the last just couple of years. Our relationship is better than ever. And it's only because I changed the way I looked at him, not the way that he responded to me. Because I know, like I mentioned before, he had given me a whole lot of other support. I just didn't see it. I just saw it differently. So that's the most important thing that happened in my life, was writing this book from the way that I view other people in my life now.
What is the story that you tell yourself about yourself? It seems like this journaling practice that you then took the natural progression to turn it into a book, there were some cathartic elements there, and it helped you basically form that story, right?
Yeah. Well, what I learned is you can't really believe. This is Andy Andrews, is one of my favorite authors, and he says you can't always believe what you think. That was true with me. I thought it was a certain way. I thought my brother got treated better. I thought that they didn't do for me what I wanted them to do. And when I changed my thinking and what I believe, I didn't believe what I thought. It was miraculous how my parents changed, but they didn't really change. They were still who they were. It was me. And this isn't even like, 20 years ago, the story. This is, going back to 3 Christmases ago. That's how amazing this is that you can change as this goes on.
So Vincent, changing how you think, I assume that has far-reaching consequences past just the relationship with your parents, which, albeit, is a huge one. If that's transformed it with, potentially lifelong animosity into a better relationship. But can you talk us through your journey to how you've changed your thought process and where else you've seen it positively impact your life?
Oh, it's branched out into almost every area of my life. The way that I am as a husband, the way that I am as a dad, as a friend. It was the type of thing where, in the photography world, it was very much dog eat dog. I got to get the shot. If I'm on the sideline of the Super Bowl or, some playoff game, like, you're not getting in my way and I'm getting the shot because I have one job to do. So that's the way I thought as an employee, was like, I got to do my job. I don't really care what happens, especially maybe that's the New Yorker in me a little bit. It's dog eat dog. Like, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to get it. So it was very much me first. It was very much what I need. And what I've learned in this process over the last 10 years, that's not the way that works. That's not the way that builds relationships, friendships. And I've kind of really taken this to shift in terms of, I need to train. I'm naturally selfish. I think a lot of us are, but I really am. And what I've had to learn is it's a give first type of thing if you want to have a happy life. So it's basically so I've shifted everything. I train myself to be a giver daily, because it doesn't just come, it sounds terrible. It just doesn't come naturally to think, oh, whose book can I review today? Or who could I send a note to today to encourage them or something like that? That's something that I knew I had to get better at from this process. So now that's how I spend a good majority of my workday, is giving back to what other people are doing. The amazing thing about that is how much comes back from that, but unintentionally. I mean, we could talk for 10 hours about what's happened because of that mindset shift.
I love that. I love that you started that paragraph essentially by saying, I am such a selfish person. And you finished that paragraph by saying, I've realized that I have to always be giving. For me, that redirection has made my life so much better. And that's powerful. And you've seen it work. And you can't go into it with that, what am I going to get mindset, but you've definitely seen it pay dividends over the years.
I was on a coaching call right before this, and I was explaining to them, it was, if you look at somebody that's unsuccessful, you will generally find somebody that's thinking about themselves. They're worried about how they're going to pay their bills, what they didn't get, what they need to get, how somebody wronged them. It's all about them. I was that person for a long period of time. You look at successful people. I mean, really look at them. They are thinking of others first. They were thinking how they could serve other people with their business, how they could help them, how they can what they can do for others. I never had that. So I got surface level success back in the day but it was empty.
Well, shockingly, you gave us a little bit of a head fake there when you said photographing on the Super Bowl sidelines. And I'm sure somebody who, doesn't know you is thinking to themselves, oh, well, that's how he made it. That's the story of his success. And that, my understanding is, that is absolutely not the story that we're about to hear. And what I'd be curious is, can you help us bridge the gap between the point in time where you decide photography, that's what I'm going to pursue, to this serious inflection in your life where you start going down this trail, which you call the 4 years of freedom? Help us unpack that story.
From that time, that night with my dad, I said, I have a purpose on something. I'm going to go do something. And it felt phenomenal. For the first time in my life, I had focus. So I took my camera and I was in New York, so I didn't have very much money. So I would buy the cheapest ticket to a Yankees game or a Met game or an Islander game. And I would sneak to the front row of almost every game. I would watch the security guards, and I kind of watched the way that they moved and their patterns. And I figured out that within, 2 or 3 innings, I could be in the front row of any game. So I'd buy a $5 ticket, I'd be in the front row. And I would go to where the photographer's pit was, where the photographers shoot from. And in between innings, I would just ask them questions. What kind of film do you use? What kind of cameras? Who do you work for? How much money do you make? They must have got so tired of me, but I would just 4 or 5 nights a week, I would go down there. I would bring my pictures. I would show them. They would tell me if it sucked. They'd tell me if it was good. So it was kind of getting like a mentorship, like in the front row at Yankee Stadium. And that went on for about a year and a half. I would apply for internships and jobs, and I got rejected. I think more than 100 times people said no, even to free internships. But I would keep doing it. And then I took a long trip around the Midwest, and I got to Green Bay. This was kind of the turning point where I bought a $20 ticket to a Packers game. It was from an old guy outside that his wife didn't want to go. I got lucky. It was sold out. And I was in the front row taking pictures before the game started. And a guy came over, and he sees me, and he says, "What are you doing? Are you taking pictures?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can you help me out?" I said, "What do you need?" He goes, "Well, my assistant didn't show up tonight. Can you come on the field with me and change my film for me? When you're not doing that, you can take all the pictures you want." So literally I'm on the sideline. He opens the gate, like this magical yellow gate, puts a press pass around my neck, and I'm on the sidelines of Lambeau Field. It's Brett Favre's first MVP season, 1995. And I'm in the huddle with him as he's getting ready. Literally my career, like that night, I mean, there's so many stories that came from it. I walked out of there that night and I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do for my life. So that came from just the constant pursuit of like chasing these different games. I wasn't getting paid anything, but I didn't care. I was, working side jobs to make the money, but I wanted to do what I wanted to do on the side. So I don't know if that answers it, but that was a big part of it.
Well, it certainly, yeah, it absolutely tells us a little bit about your character and how much you were willing to put into something that you were passionate about. But my understanding is your life doesn't get significantly easier from here. I mean, you have some massive hurdles that you have to overcome. And I believe at this point, walk us through, like, what gets you to the point where you're saying to myself, I have to make a change and now pursue getting out of debt? How do you get to that point where you're actually focused on this financial aspect of your life? Because right now it seems like your passion is purely photography, and clearly the money isn't the driving factor because you're working for free.
Not at all. I was 20 something. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have kids. As long as I could buy a hamburger and a beer, I was cool. I got to where I went to school at Ohio University for journalism. I met my wife there. We both graduated and we both got jobs at a newspaper in Evansville, Indiana, Evansville Courier and Press. And we became normal. From the moment I got the job there, I became normal. I never had a car loan before. I took out a car payment because everybody had a car payment. We had some student loans and we bought a house. So now we have debt. And I was never a debt guy. I watched my dad's business crumble when I was a teenager and I never wanted to borrow money. So I was adverse to it, unlike a lot of people, but I got into it because everybody else was doing it. Everybody else got a job. Everybody else got debt. And I was doing what everybody else was doing. But I continued with my career. So now we have all this debt, about 140 grand of debt. But I'm continuing doing well with my career. And that's what, I shot the Super Bowl then, the World Series, the whole thing. And I had just won International Sports Photographer of the Year. This is 2004. They called me in for my raise. Oh, and on top of it, my wife was pregnant with our first son. I win the biggest award in my field, and I have a baby on the way. And I go in for my evaluation where this is where everybody said, this is where you're going to get your big pay raise. And they sat me down and they listed all my accomplishments. And my boss took his glasses off and he rubbed his eyes and he said, the best we could do is give you 3%. He said, I tried to give you 4%. He said, but I gave you 3%. Nobody else got anything because the newspaper business is tough right now, but I got 3%. And I remember saying to him, no matter how hard I work, no matter what I do, no matter how many awards I win, and I stopped myself. I was like sweating. I was so angry. I walked out of his office and I said, that's it. I said, this career as I know it, that I've been fighting for, it's over. Because I know that if I follow this path in 20, 30 years, I'm going to be that same angry employee out in the newsroom like everybody else. And the story goes, I went and I called my dad. This was 10 years later. I told him and I asked him if I can go work for him because he had his own business. And he told me no. He said, you can't help me. He goes, I'd have to retrain you. You'd have to come to New York. We can't do that. And he said something that changed my life. And it's the cornerstone of my book. He said to me, he goes, I've been telling you to start your own business. You don't want to do it because you're comfortable in your job. He goes, you have a skill, but you're not using it correctly. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you're doing this. Everybody loves your work, but you're settling for $32,000 a year on their schedule when you could do anything you want with this skill. And I said, I knew nothing about business. So I was like, so I just, I called Elizabeth. I said, I called different wedding photographers to see if we could work with them. And they all turned me down. And I took the phone book. You remember a phone book? And I threw it against the wall. I was so angry. And I said, well, if you can't beat them, they say, if you can't beat them, join them. I said, well, if you can't join them, we're going to beat them. We're starting a business. And that moment we started our business. And that's when we got on the path. We found Dave Ramsey, who I know you guys talk about. We followed his path and we just decided to do one thing that changed our life. And that was Elizabeth was going to quit her job and be with Andrew. I was going to stay in my job. And I was going to start this business, and every dollar that we made in this business, we were going to put towards our debt to get financially free. And we were going to live off of my job. And that one thing got us on our path.
That is really, truly amazing. And what advice from your dad, and what an intelligent comment about you being comfortable in your job. How many people end up in a job for 40 plus years just because it's inertia? They're comfortable. It pays the bills, X, Y, and Z, right? And they never take that chance. But that one meeting with the boss only giving you a 3% raise when you're at the absolute top of your field, and then that subsequent conversation with your dad just changed your entire life.
It did, because what I thought about and I wrote about it, I was like, if he would have given me 10%, I would have stayed. That would have been more than enough, I thought, for me then. But we would have used that 10%, with something. It would have been gone. I would have still been disgruntled. And I would have come home every night complaining about the way they treat me. And I have no control over this. I have no control over that. That's what we were doing already. My wife and I were already doing that. And so it was really uncomfortable. And that's like, you talk about life lessons. It was like, you will be comfortable being uncomfortable. And you hear it now all the time. But that was really it. Like, you have to constantly stay uncomfortable. So that was a big thing that I learned.
So Vincent, the ultimate difference there is about $2,000, right? Because you're saying if he would have given you a 10% raise on 32,000, that's about $3,000, and he gave you 3%. So you're talking about $2,000, and that would have been
taxes.
Enough. Yeah, right. That is amazing. What a fortuitous thing, right? Where you don't get what you want, but it causes you to really jolt out of your life and take that chance.
And that's so much for, I think, so many of us, is like, the best thing that happened to me is not getting what I thought I wanted. We think we want this, but often it's not the best thing for us. So that would have been the worst thing in the world. If he would have given me 15%, I would have felt indebted to him for the next 20 years. And I would never have made more than $45,000 a year or $50,000. And the ironic part about it is, and this goes to what can happen, and we'll talk to all in between it. I took those same skills, the same mindset. Instead of trying to sell it to a newspaper, I teamed up with my friend Kyle Schultz, who runs an online photo school, right? He teaches parents how to take better pictures of their kids. We did a sports photography course, teaching parents how to take better sports pictures of their kids. It's natural. There's so many people that want it. We launched that in May. That course made $32,000 in the first day. That made as much as I made in a year at the newspaper. These things would never even be possible if I continued on the mindset that I used to have.
That certainly speaks to the power of the new economy and how much lower the barrier is to entry for people to enter the business world. But I think even more than that was what you were saying about the self-worth and self-value. And in your mind, going back to your story, you were at this point where your value was less than 3%. And you were letting yourself be defined by, just a boss who had his own budget constraints, good, bad, or indifferent. That was how your worth was valued. And then it's so easy for people to take that and then apply that to themselves, when in reality, that's a limiting belief. Obviously, that's not true. And I love that in your case, you took the blinders off and you said, what would my life look like outside of this construct?
Yeah. And I would like to give myself credit that I saw that back then, but I didn't. I was very desperate. Because I knew I couldn't live like that. So that's why we knew that we had no envisionment of a really successful business, of like a 6-figure wedding business. We didn't have that at all. There was like, we need to make money to pay for diapers, and they're not supplying that with us. And there's no other way. And I can't get another newspaper job in Evansville, Indiana. There were only 5. It wasn't like I could transfer that to like, oh, I'll go work with somebody else for that. Like sometimes having so little options is the best thing you could possibly do. Because if I had 4 other jobs, I can play back and forth and maybe they give me a little more money. I had no other option but to start something. And the thing I try to tell myself right now is I think everybody needs that, because there's so many people that are comfortable in jobs, but they don't really like it. But they know, like, well, I have to start another job. Maybe I could do this. I can apply here. And it's almost like you have to burn the boats, that whole saying, like burn the boats, and you have to do something. Just go get started right now, because I really believe almost everybody needs a side gig of some sort. And that's the way it is right now.
I love it. We have a good friend, Alan Donegan, who has a business called Pop-Up Business School. And right now, I promise you, he's listening to this and he's standing up cheering. So that is amazing. But aside from that, I wanted to highlight this almost design your future type lifestyle that you talked about. And specifically, I want it, as you're building this business from scratch and you're looking at the competition that you've decided you're going to beat, you have this red X moment. I'd love for you to tell our audience about that.
Yeah, I couldn't remember his name when I wrote the book, and I actually just messaged him, because when we do the next edit, I have to put his name in there. But I did remember it like about 2 months ago. His name is Kevin Swan, and he's a photographer in Indianapolis. I was looking at his website because we were just this crappy little business. We had this, if you would see our website, it was brutal how bad we were when we started. We designed it ourselves, and Dreamweaver. It's terrible. But I found this guy, Kevin Swan. He had this really fancy website. He was charging big money for weddings and corporate shoots. I'm like, I want to be that guy. I want to do what that guy's doing. And I looked at his schedule. So we had an online calendar, and he had December, and we were, busting our butts in December. We were just like anything we can get. And he had the whole month X'd out. Every day had a big red X through it. At the bottom, it said, we're taking December off to spend time with our family. My head almost exploded. Like, I was like, who can do that? Like who can afford to take the entire month off just to spend time with I would love to do that, but I couldn't even imagine it. But I never lost that. I never lost that picture. That one thing shaped, we're in December right now and we live that life. We get to do what we want to do when we want to do. And it was such a huge influence that it actually could be done because so many people were telling us, oh, the wedding photography business is dying. The money's going down. Nobody pays for it anymore. And this guy showed me that that wasn't true. And most people will tell you that you can't do it and you have to follow the ones that do. So that was huge for me and for us.
I'm always struck by these inflection points in people's lives where, you've talked about 3 of them, right? 2 of them with your dad, and then finding this one photographer who took off the month of December, and you see it modeled and you see it become real. That could not have crossed your mind, like you said, that anybody could do that. But then you see this guy and the proof is in the pudding, right? It's possible. So what did the next year of your life look like after that inflection point? How did you go about building your business? Where did you go from there?
It was a lot of learning. Those next 2 years were unbelievable. 2006, 2007. It was a lot of mistakes. It was doing retainers that weren't good that we got. We lost thousands of dollars because of our decisions that we made. Working with the wrong clients, which was a big thing that we learned in terms of turning down. What I learned around 2008 was it's good for the soul to turn down bad clients. It's just good for your soul to say no, to not do it just for the money. Because the first 2 years we did it just for the money. And then you wind up working with people that we were like, I wish we wouldn't. If we didn't need the money, there's no way in the world we would have taken that job. And I think that could be reflected not only in the freelance world, but also in the regular world. If it wasn't for the money, would you really be in that job you're in right now? And you'd be, you guys probably know how many people say they would not be in that job, but it's they've got themselves in such financial straits that they have to. And to go off topic a little bit, like when you get that well-paying job, well, you're going to buy a better car in this world. You're going to buy a bigger house. You have a baby, you're going to buy a bigger house because, Lord knows that a 6-pound baby needs, 12-foot ceilings. Because that's where we go in this world. So all of a sudden, you used to make this amount of money and you could live off of it. Now you and your wife both have car payments and you both have student loans. You have a credit card and then you have a house payment. And then, she wants to stay home with your baby. Well, how do you do that? Because now if she leaves, now your salary has got to cover all that stuff. And now you're stuck in a job that you hate. And you don't even though you're making 125 grand, you don't see any of it. And that's the way this has gone. So that's what we were learning in this process to not do.
So with your story at this point in time, you guys are at the point where you're living off of one income. That's your income. Yep. So $32,000 a year, $140,000 in debt that you've made the decision, because that includes your mortgage. You've made the decision. Yep. We are going to have no debt in our life. We're on the Dave Ramsey train. We are going to get to absolutely 100% debt free. And you have a baby now, and you have a business that you're in theory going to be supplementing this income with, but you're bad at it. You're still making all the rookie mistakes that come with this business. And you're telling your friends, we have to pay down all of our debt. What sort of pushback are you getting from your friends and family who frankly think you've drunk the Kool-Aid and have lost your mind?
Tremendous pushback. I was stunned. I was stunned by how many people didn't agree with it, didn't support it, how many family members didn't support it. Really disappointing. And as I look back and I talk to people about it, a lot of people feel the same way. I think this community that, the Choose FI community, we're an odd lot in this world. Most people don't get it. Most people want, the job and the, debt is normal, and working for somebody else till you're 65 and 70 is normal. And they don't get this. So it's kind of like you become like a cult, because the people that got it, but they were few. So I had to kind of battle with people constantly, whether it was family or friends or whatever, about what we were trying to do. You only live once. And we had a vision. We had a 10-year vision of what we wanted life to look like. Our first son was born and we said, what do we want it to look like when he's 10 or 11? He's 12 now. And what we wanted was, we didn't care about stuff. This was the big difference. We didn't care about the house, the big house or the cars. We wanted freedom. We wanted not just money freedom. It wasn't like we wanted to be cared about being wealthy, but I didn't want to worry about money at all. I didn't want to wake up in the middle of the night thinking about money. What I wanted more than anything was time freedom. I didn't want anybody telling me what to do with my time. I wanted to control it. That was huge. And I wanted to be able to travel with our family whenever we wanted to and raise them the way that we wanted to. And those were the 3 big things that we decided when we were broke with a brand new business. That's what we wanted life to look like 10 years from now. So having that vision allowed us to hold off on all the things that, the delayed gratification that most people weren't holding off on. We looked like nutballs for 3 years, but 3 years later when we quit, then everybody's like, how'd you do that? They were no longer making fun of it. Now they were curious.
Vincent, what was all the pushback about? I mean, when you're describing it, like, are you sitting people down and saying, like, we have this 10-year vision? Or are you saying, hey, we're going to pay off all our debt? And if so, like, what was the pushback? And, what do you think people were thinking when you described this to them?
It wasn't blatant. It was more you go out to lunch, you don't use credit card, or you don't go on the vacation or go out drinking or saving money or whatever. If it came up, it was always kind of subtle. And they're like, well, what are you doing? And I think when the word starts getting out, and we were a little bit nutty, at least I was, when you start doing this, you get excited about it. So you want to tell people about it. I probably talked about it way too much at that point to other people. And they were like,
I can relate.
Jonathan's hearing his own life here.
Wait, well, Vincent, I do. I would love to hear not just on the paying off debt, but what about the part where you start working on your own business? I mean, the people that you're working with in this news center, surely, they were aware of your plans to start a business. Were you getting any blowback from that front?
Yeah, because first of all, they made fun of us because when you come from the news world, shooting weddings, that's like, that's crazy. You are selling out. If you go shoot weddings, I'm a journalist. I'm too good to be a wedding photographer. That's the perception. So we're all sitting there making $30,000 to $40,000 a year, complaining about it. But yet there's all this work to be had that these guys out here or girls out here shooting, we looked at it and they weren't very good. Like, we were skilled journalists that we could really bring something to the market. So when we shot our first wedding, the reaction was overwhelming. Like, we charged $1,500 and they were like over the moon. I'm like, wait a second. If we see what people are charging, if we charge $3,000 and we do 20 weddings, we make as much as if we both work 240 years out of the year. I remember being in the bathroom of the newspaper and calculating that, and I almost just fell down. I was like, same amount of money, we control the time. And what we learned was, and everybody gave us this pushback, was we got to tell the wedding stories the same way we did in the newspaper. We got to tell a story, real emotion, just exactly what we did, but just in long form. So it wasn't what we thought it would be. The thing you learn is the more success you have. I remember hearing Tony Robbins talk about this. Everybody wants to buy him dinner. And he's like, everybody wants to buy me dinner now, but where were they when I was 19 and broke at Denny's? Like, nobody wanted to buy him dinner then. It's when things started happening well that they did. It's the same thing. When it's not going well, people question you. If I tried the same thing now, people would be like, that's a great idea. I guess because I've earned some trust with it. But it's like, back then, nobody believed that we would do anything. So, and I'm kind of the type of thing where I don't mind trying to prove people wrong. That's just in my personality. So it didn't hurt me to go through that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about this, so you're starting this business and you've decided to, at the same time, make all these sacrifices to pay down a significant amount of debt. At some point, there will be an example of something that it is very difficult to turn down, an expense or a luxury that's very difficult to turn down. What was that point for you? What was the most painful thing that you had to say no to during the time you were paying down debt?
Yeah, I grew up a diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Like, my first 2 years of watching football, they won the Super Bowl. Late 70s, Steel Curtain, like, they were my team. But the first game I ever went to was at Shea Stadium, New York, Terry Bradshaw's last game as a quarterback. So I followed them my entire life. And if they ever made the Super Bowl, I wanted to go to the Super Bowl. Now, I wasn't in a position to get a press pass for it at this time. I didn't cover the Steelers. But in 2005, they made the Super Bowl. And it was unexpected. They made this last-minute run, and they made it all the way to the Super Bowl. And I wanted to go. And we had the money. Like, we were saving the money for the debt, and it was like $2,000 for the ticket. It was what I had wanted to do, as a fan. That was the ticket I wanted. And so I bugged and coerced Elizabeth into agreeing, and she wasn't really on board with it, but she signed off. She's like, I know you've been waiting for it. And she kind of begrudgingly gave me the okay to go buy the ticket. And so I had the ticket on the screen. I was ready to buy it. I had the button, and I didn't do it. I couldn't do it. The problem was I knew that I was being a giant hypocrite, because for a year and a half, I was saying, we need to cut budget. We need to do this. We need to, not go out to eat here. And then when it's something that I could envision Elizabeth, what I would have done to her is made her very resentful, to where in a week from now or a month from now, when I say, oh, we can't do this, she's like, yeah, we have to sacrifice unless it's something you really want. So I didn't do it. And that was painful. We watched the game and I didn't even really enjoy it because I knew I would have been there. But what happens, and this is really a big part of the story, is we kept going. And I kept that. I still wanted to do that at some point if it ever happened. Well, 3 years later, we had paid off our house. We had paid off all of our debt. We had quit our jobs. And guess what? The Steelers went back to the Super Bowl. So this time I was looking up tickets after the playoff game, and Elizabeth comes downstairs and she says, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for tickets. And I told her the price, and she just looked at me and she said, buy it. I said, you serious? Just like that? She's like, this is what we did this for. So I got to see the Steelers win like the best Super Bowl ever. when they had like 100-yard touchdown return and they won it in the last second. That was a fun story to live through.
What does that conversation look like when you walk away from your computer in the 2005 season? You were just about ready to click buy. You decide not to. What's the conversation with Elizabeth like after that?
I was resentful. I was like, if the Steelers would have won the Super Bowl in any other situation, I would have been like having this party. I was downstairs at our bar and I was just watching the celebration. I was kind of like, I should be there. I didn't take it out on her. I didn't get mad at her, but I was just like, I really wanted to do that. But I just knew it wasn't the right decision to do. I knew, even though I didn't feel it, I knew it was, I couldn't have went. It would not have been right to do it. We're all glad they went back because I don't have to talk about that story anymore when I got to actually see it.
We're glad you had the opportunity. So Vincent, in your mind, you had a 4-year process to pay down $140,000 of debt on a $32,000 a year salary with a business that at the time of origin was making nothing, and you were reportedly just bad at everything. I mean, you missed, except for talent. I mean, at this point, you had a significant talent that was being brought to an industry that hadn't seen your particular skill set and background, but you were learning the business side from the ground up. At what point did you realize my business has legs and it's just an iteration type process? When did it all really come together?
I'm not sure if there was an exact moment. I just know within there, when we started seeing what we were doing and we started seeing how the rates were going up slowly but surely, and the debt was coming down. Like when we got our mortgage down below $100,000, and I think we had probably booked a $4,000 wedding that same week. I remember being in the backyard with our dog and our son. And I remember thinking, this is starting to work. I felt like we were going downhill now. Referrals were starting to come in. We had built relationships with people, other vendors. We had kept on. We didn't give up on the path. That was the first time where it was like, this is really starting to work. And then you start projecting. And you guys know, like when you start projecting this stuff, it gets exciting. It's like, wait a second. If we take on a little bit more, we could do a little bit more. So if we do this for another year and a half, and then we can kind of go at our pace. But we really have to go at it now. So once we got that momentum, it was exciting because I didn't care if I was doing 3 weddings in a weekend. I didn't care if I was working because we actually had a purpose of what we were doing and a goal. The hardest part, we called 2007 the year of work. That was what considered the hardest part. It was the most exciting to me because all of a sudden, everything we had envisioned in the future was starting to become clear. We were starting to be able to see what was going to happen. As painful as it was, that was exciting for me.
Did you always prioritize debt? Was that always the goal? Just paying off that $140K and then going from there? Or did you save an emergency fund? Did you do other type of investing, or was it all just plow that money into all the debt?
No, it was really debt driven because I've noticed with me is when I have one singular focus, I could pretty much do anything. If I'm going to sit down to write a book, I'm going to get the book done. I'm not going to waffle and do the book and 17 other different things, other projects. Get the book done, then do the next step. With us, no matter how we projected it, it was like there's such a mental freedom with getting rid of that debt that is hard to explain unless you get there. We never have to think about the mortgage again. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to take any clients because of it. And that's when we started noticing the mental freedom. It was like we started raising our prices because we're getting better at it and we needed it less. Now, all of a sudden, instead of doing 39 weddings, we're doing 25 weddings. That just freed up 12 weekends of our year. It's amazing what you could do with 12 extra weekends in a year. What happened was this, and was really pretty incredible. That last year was really difficult, kept paying down the debt. When we paid off the debt, paid off the house and everything, at that point, our business, because of 4 years of hustle and work, we were the most expensive photographers in Evansville. So not only did we have no debt, but we had a very successful business at this point. It's so hard that if I had to get anything through to somebody about this is if you do that work, if you take that time, all of a sudden there's this diminishing return where it's like it explodes. No more financial obligations for the most part that you need, and you have all this extra money to do stuff with and time. And all of a sudden it's like the world opens up. It was the months after that when we realized we could do whatever we want every day. That was just enthralling.
So Vincent, to me, your story is the perfect example of how you keep putting the work in and it takes a while to see the results. Did you feel that as well? Just almost the aggregation of marginal gains where just the time you're putting in over and over it compounds and the results just far exceed what you ever could have imagined?
It's exactly spot on. And it's so, I guess, cliche. Like Darren Hardy and the compound effect is the same thing. Zig Ziglar, like I wrote about in my book with priming the pump. I don't think there's a better analogy than that, where, you're priming the pump to get water and it's just constant and you're working and you're sweating and there's nothing that comes from it. And you want to quit. What's the point of doing this? And you keep going and you keep going. And then when you think you're about done and there's nothing left, a tiny bit of water comes out. And it's not enough to do anything. Won't even, quench your thirst at all. But it yielded something. And that's what we felt that with the business. And then you keep going and then a little bit more and then a little bit more. Then it's sustainable. Then you're getting enough that you can get by. Then with just a little bit more effort and understanding the way, even the motion of priming the pump, boom, the water starts flying out and then it's unlimited. And that really is what we've learned. The hardest part, it's like the airplane taking off. The most energy is during the takeoff. And then it's easy. Not saying this is ever easy because you're constantly learning, but man, what a difference.
Vincent, was it always a photography business? Were there ways that you found to scale it? Are there any kind of actionable takeaways the audience can get from the mechanics of your business?
Yeah, it was. Up until 3 years ago, it was strictly photography. And it's the same thing with the priming the pump. What has led to, and success brings success. And I try to think about that all the time because what has happened from what we did wrong is we didn't teach this earlier. We never wanted to be teachers. But we've seen so many people now with the online world explode kind of teaching this stuff. And some of them have learned photography after we were even free from all this. They shot for 2 years and they did like an online course or a membership site. We didn't do any of that. That's a big mistake that we made because we had all the experience to do it. So we learned slowly in some ways. That's a mistake that we've had. But in the last couple of years, between writing the book and coaching online courses, membership site, all this type of stuff, it just branches out to different areas. We've learned so many different areas of business from it. So we're pretty new in just kind of the new economy part of it, but it's so exciting, the possibilities out there. So I'm like, when people tell me they don't have time or whatever, or it's so hard now, it is so much easier now than it was in 2005. And that's where it's like, man, if we could have done it then, you could do it now.
What I thought was interesting is the title of your book wasn't The Entrepreneur Path to Freedom, but Freelance to Freedom. And I was just curious, how did you land on that title?
I like the way it sounded. It was really very simple. It really is like you said, like it's not a get rich quick scheme. And I think a lot of people are used to hearing that or want to hear that because I get people like, what are the hacks? What are the quick tips? And there's really no quick tips. There's a lot of lessons learned, but man, this takes work. It takes work, and more than work, it takes dedication. I mean, one avenue of my book that was cornerstone was I wanted to work for the Associated Press in New York. When you work for the AP in New York, you get all the big assignments. Like I photographed the Dalai Lama, every world leader you could imagine. I'm right next to photographing them. I wanted that gig, and I would call the AP and Rockefeller Center every week to go set up a meeting with them. Every week they set up a meeting and then they canceled. 6 weeks in a row, I called back, rescheduled, they canceled. Did it again for the 7th week. I went to Rockefeller Center. I brought my portfolio, nervous as you can imagine. And he sat down with me and he looked at me and he said, Vincent, he goes, I want to thank you for your patience and your persistence. And he said, without both of those, we wouldn't be here right now. That was 1998. And I've never forgotten that. And I think about it every day because if I would have had patience without persistence, I would have never done anything. I would have been like, oh, I'll get there. If I would have had persistence without patience, I would have been that annoying person that you see all the time that bugs everybody. But with patience and persistence, you always stay balanced. So no matter what we do, it's helped elevate all of our other businesses because I constantly think patience and persistence. And anything will get done if you do it that way. But so many people are either too patient or too persistent, and they don't put it together well. So that was a big part of it for me.
Yeah, I love that. And it's certainly those two together, the patience and the persistence, and just being willing to iterate the process and continually get better. Honestly, the second half of your book is so packed full of just actionable tips for that freelancer, that entrepreneur that's slowly beginning their business and trying to figure out how do you go from zero to something that works and can put food on the table for you and your family. I loved how you brought it all together. But since we don't have time to do 6 or 7 hours to walk through that whole thought process, what are some actionable takeaways that you could give to our audience, especially if they're trying to tease out whether or not even pursuing something like this might be right for them?
There's so much. I'll tell you one that's so simple, but it helps me every single day. The main thing I hear with people that have their own business, solopreneurs, side hustlers, freelancers, it's overwhelm of what, there's so much to do, and then they rattle off everything they have to do. And then they just throw their hands in the air and just don't do any of it. And the one thing that I learned, and this is really more recent, this is within the last 5 years, is just to be better than yesterday. It sounds so simple, but my goodness, when I go, I just need to be better than yesterday. All I need to do today is have a great interview with you guys. I need to do a great mastermind call with my guys, and I need to reach out to 10 people. Everything else is bonus. Now, the more you do this, the less becomes urgent. It's kind of like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You want to do work that is important but not urgent. That's quadrant 2 in that book. What we always said was we want our life to be in quadrant 2 of that book, where everything is important but not urgent. The more urgent things you could get out of your life over time, the easier it all gets and the better it gets. So being better than yesterday, it's so simple, but it works every single time I'm overwhelmed.
Vincent, how do you focus on the important things, like actually on a granular level? Do you sit down at the beginning of a week, of a month, of a day, and decide what's important for, that period of time? Or like, talk to us about what that actually looks like in your life.
Yeah, I got to meet Tim Ferriss last winter when his book released and got to talk to him a little bit and ask him about how he does things. And he had an interesting approach. He said he does things in 2-week and 6-month intervals. And I never heard that before. So I kind of adopted that, and it really has changed the way that I work, because right now I'm rolling out a membership site for this platform. And that is my focus. That is my 2018 focus. So I run a couple mastermind groups. I have my coaching that I do. And so everything is going into that. I'm not going to get distracted, because I know that's the thing that's going to get us to the next level. Because I've also learned that you always have to challenge yourself. I don't want to keep doing the same thing. So always got to bring new stuff in and eliminate the things that I don't want to do. So every year around October, Liz and I sit down and go, what don't we want to do anymore? And let's start phasing that out. And what do we want to do? Because I know that I've been there. I had 20 weddings a year with no debt and money in the bank. I didn't have to do very much. And I see that a lot of times where people are like, oh, I don't want to work anymore. I want to be 43 and quit. Like, that's boring. Let me give you one tip that's boring, because I got to do that. And after 6 months, it's really kind of empty. I always want to be growing somewhere. So that's where this thing comes from. So that's my goal. So I have one focus going into 2018, work-wise, which is to build and grow this awesome membership site. So that's where. So when I have that as my goal to the end of next year, it's very simple to break that down into 3 months, and then 1 month, and then a week, and then a day. So sometimes what I need to do in that one day only takes an hour to get done what I need to get done for that ultimate goal. It takes away all the overwhelm.
Have you started to break that down in 3-month increments for 2018, or do you do it like Tim Ferriss said, 2 weeks by 2 weeks? Like, I'm sorry to keep drilling on this, but
I love it.
I need to get better at this in my own life. So this is really helpful for me and presumably for the audience out there, obviously.
Yeah, I'll break it down. May 2nd, I have a founding launch of my membership, which is just people that are already in my community that I'm offering this to. But May 2nd, for instance, this site is going live. That's my dad's birthday. It's symbolic because of what he's done for me. So I chose May 2nd as the day that we're going to do that. That's essentially almost 6 months from right now. So it's very easy for me now, because this is my new shift. 6 months from today, what does that have to look like for me to be where I want to be with that? And then, essentially I break that down into 3 months, and then a month. And then what do I have to get done this week? That's the chart that goes on the wall. And then from what needs to get done that week, it basically gets divided, and what needs to get done today. And it's remarkable when you do that, how little you actually have to do to get that done. We just get so frantic in so many different things that we get nothing done. And I've been there and done that. And this is the school of hard knocks that I've learned from, not a university. We can go deeper into that, but that's the outline of how I go about it.
I love that, because for me, it seems like the urgent, quote unquote, fills up, it swells to fill whatever amount of time you have, right? Because there's always Facebook, there's always somebody asking a question via email, and that stuff is important. And obviously I want to get back to people, clearly, but it swells to fill that time you have. So I love that singular focus. And then you probably feel pretty darn good about yourself. And wow, I accomplished what I needed to today, as opposed to, hey, it's 8:00. I look back on my day and I have no idea what I did.
Trust me, I've been there, both of those places. I've been both of those places often this year, this month. On the days that everything goes smooth, I'm waking up calm and I'm ending work calm. That's the way I want to live, because I've got 3 boys, and it's not about the business. It's about how I'm raising them and what kind of a husband and a dad I'm being. There's no point in building this successful business if I'm not here with my kids, if I'm not here mentally with my kids. Yeah. And that was a big thing for freedom for us, was I wanted freedom from somebody else's schedule. I want to be able to work from home. I want to be able to take off. Like the beautiful day rule in the book is we have a beautiful day rule, which in Pittsburgh, if there's a beautiful day, which we get more of now than they're used to, we get to take the day off. If there's anything scheduled urgent, we do it. And otherwise, we have a free pass to take the kids to the park or to go wherever. And that was a rule that we wanted from the very beginning in our life. We did not want to be controlled by the business, but the business does give us so much satisfaction. So that's a big part.
Yeah, I mean, that is the independence and financial independence, right? That's incredible. So that's what your life looks like. You have 3 kids, you and your wife are both in the house, and you have this flexibility, right?
Yeah. So what happened was, and I haven't even talked to you about this, I went to see Chris Guillebeau about three weeks ago. He wrote a book called Side Hustle. He wrote the $100 Startup a couple of years ago. And he said how with his first book, he didn't have a big publisher, and he went to all 50 states and he visited people that read the book. And he goes, some places there were only 2 people. So I looked at Elizabeth when we were listening to him, and we were planning January 2nd. We are leaving, and we are going for 3 months on the road. This was already planned. We've got a month in Arizona and a month in California, and we're choosing the 3rd month. And I said to her, why don't we do a 50-state thank you tour instead of a book tour? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, let's see if we can go to every state this year, and we'll thank people and give the book to the people that have helped us out. Instead of doing book signings or whatever, maybe we'll do some of those, but it really is to the heart of everything we teach, which is to give first and to thank people, and everything comes from that. So that's what we're doing. January 2nd, we hit the road, and we're going to do 3 legs of the tour. And that was our dream. So, in 3 weeks, we get to hit the road and do that.
Yeah. I love it, man. I love everything about it. It's so consistent the whole way through. And so I hope that someone will absolutely go ahead and check your book out. I'm certainly going to put a link to it in the show notes as well.
Well, thank you for having, this is just a lot of fun. I love the conversation.
It's cool to see the diversity of experiences of people that are in the FI community and honestly what FI means for those individual people. But it sounds to me like you are crushing the Red X game at this point.
It's funny because it's like, and I wonder if people feel this way too, other people that are going through this. If you would have told me my life would look like this 10 years ago, I would have signed off in a second. Oh my goodness. But when you're there, comparing to 10 years ago, I don't feel like that. I feel like there's so much more to do now. Not that I'm unsatisfied with it, but I always think that no matter where you get when you're in FI, when you get there, I truly believe that you got to keep pushing forward. You got to keep challenging yourself. You always have to be uncomfortable in some area because that's how you grow. I always thought, if we get there, we have the money, and we have the time, it's just paradise. And it's good, but it's not paradise. Paradise is growing and learning and accomplishing things. That's to me, at least. So I don't feel like I'm crushing it right now because I have so many things I have to learn right now the next year or two. So I feel like I'm in phase 1 without the same money issues that I used to have. That's how I feel.
Vincent, I hear you completely. When you said that 10 years ago, could you have imagined your life would be like this? And I know I personally could not have. I never could have envisioned this when I was sitting there in an office 9 to 5, filling out tax returns. Mm-hmm. And now here I am talking to tens of thousands of people about my passion in life, right? Financial independence and the superpower that is financial independence. It's remarkable. And a quote that I heard about a year ago at a men's retreat that I went to is, I never dreamed past here. And I feel like that would really impact you because that is exactly what we're talking about. I never dreamed past here. I looked at my life and I would have said, this would have been, like you're describing, the end. This is what the culmination would be. But when you get there, there's so much more to do. There's so much more to learn, so much more to get out of life, to build these relationships, to meet people, to help people. It's really, truly remarkable. I think about that a lot and it does stick with me. So hopefully it has some value for you as well.
I just love the conversation. I love what you guys are doing. I love what you guys are doing in your community. I think it's such a blessing to have your voices out there doing and the community you're bringing together. I'd be so excited if I was, 23 years old or 26 years old in this spot compared to, honestly, when I grew up, there was none of this talk. You'd be thrown into a psycho hospital if you talked about this 25 years ago. Nobody did this. I think the way it's evolved is so exciting. It's so exciting for my kids that we homeschool now. We've homeschooled for 3 years. Simply for the reason of we don't really want them going through the same thought process that we went through. They have their own little businesses already. Like they're already doing this stuff. We're talking about this stuff. They're not on somebody else's schedule. When the bell rings, they don't just shoot off to another class mindlessly because somebody else told them to do it. Like we talk about this stuff. So I'm excited for the way that that's going. People talk about the way the future. I'm just so jacked up about it for anybody that gets this. So I commend you guys for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's like you're normalizing and modeling this that other people can realize, hey, this is not anything crazy. Like Jonathan and I always say, and it's become kind of a thing here, like we're just two regular middle-class guys who are just living a normal life, just a little bit optimized. And anybody can do this. Anybody really, if they apply some intention, can save money, can become financially independent in X number of years, right? That's always going to change depending on people's lives, but anyone can do this. You can just be a little bit smarter and, just move forward. So it's amazing.
And I argue with my brother about that because I say that to him, and because we go back and forth, and I say, not everyone will, but anyone can.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that like everybody's going to do it. You have to want to do it. But that's a big part of it. I think I agree with you. Anybody can do it. And what we learned was a big thing for us. Everybody's like, oh, how did you guys do it? The main thing is we don't need very much. And that is our big thing. Elizabeth and I don't need very much when it comes financially. So we've learned that we can live off of very little money. When you don't have any debt and you don't have big expenses, then everything's on the table for you to do. But when you need more, when you need these things for all your kids and all these expenses, that holds you back from the potential of getting by, in my opinion. But that opens everything up. I think it's hard for people to understand.
I feel like I have to take just a second and ask, you've helped your kids establish businesses. Can you tell us, like, what are they doing?
Oh, they're not huge. One is a pet sitting business for some neighbors down the street. So they come out because, there's advantages with homeschooling. When you're homeschooling, everybody else is at work. Well, they need their dogs to be let out. So take advantage of the situation you're in. So they go and they let the dogs out. Our kids are 12, 10, and 6. So they're in the beginning of it. Our oldest is starting a blog. He is so into bugs. So we photograph them. We go out to different parks, and he's very much into praying mantises. So we photograph them. He's writing stories about them. He's writing a blog. That'll be out soon. Just explaining this. And they're following my book. I pay my son, and he finds podcasts for me to be interviewed on. He didn't find you guys. We did this naturally. But he literally...
It would have been so much better if he had. That would be the best. Oh,
right?
Missed opportunity.
So he goes an hour or so at a time, and he'll go through online and he'll find, business or money or entrepreneurial podcasts, and he lists them out for us, and he gives the links, and then we go deeper in terms of a spreadsheet. I mean, I don't need him to do it. We could do it, or we can hire it out, but I want to teach him how to do this. And so he's starting to recognize different names. He's like, oh, Pat Flynn. He's recognized the names, so he knows who they are, as opposed to being at school and I don't know what they're learning. So, that's a little part of it. We're talking about it.
That's amazing. So have you started to figure out all the accounting and paperwork type stuff that goes along with that? Are you doing it like, into nails, the whole 9 yards?
Yeah, we're figuring that out now. That's another beginning phase for us because we've never, because what we want to do, and this could be a whole nother conversation. And Jonathan, you and I talked about this, I believe, when we talked about homeschooling, was we're going to file tax return on him, and we're going to have him open up a Roth. Because if you open up a Roth now and you put a couple thousand in there for those first 7 years, if he'd never invested again, he would still have over $1 million at quote unquote retirement. It's hard to convince a 38-year-old guy stuck in a job to do this sometimes, but it's really easy to teach a 12-year-old and form them with this. So that's really where I'll be going in the later years teaching this.
I love it. Hopefully we'll accompany you on that ride. So Vincent, there's going to be a large percentage of our audience that this is the first time that they're hearing about your story, and they're going to want to connect with you either to tell you, what they got out of this episode, or maybe just ask you a follow-up question. What's the best way for someone to connect with you?
Yeah, just go to our website, thefreelancetribe.com. My email's on there. Send me an email. The book is going to be on Amazon. And if anybody wants, I'm going to give you guys a PDF. And basically, people ask us so often about the whole making 32 grand a year than making 32 grand a day. So I put together a PDF. It's top 10 tips. Some of them we talked about today, but the top 10 tips that I learned in going from making 32 grand a year to making 30 grand a day.
All right. Thank you so much, Vincent. Well, normally that would be the end of the episode, but on this show, we'd love to give you the chance to tackle the hot seat. Are you ready for this?
I am ready.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
All right, Vincent, question number 1, your favorite blog that's not your own?
Seth Godin. I mean, he is like who I follow so much in this, and he publishes every day. He's patient and persistent. So Seth, for sure.
Yeah, Seth's amazing. That's an awesome recommendation. All right. Question number 2, your favorite article of all time.
Oh, there's so many. I feel like I'm going to leave most everybody out. But Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans had a huge impact on how we run our business. Like everybody flips out about needing so many clients and a huge funnel. And he basically explains in that article, if you haven't read it, if you have 1,000 true fans, anybody can build. If you have 1,000 true fans that pay you $100 in a year, that's $100,000 a year. And you could break that down to even 100 true fans, 1,000. So that article really shaped me in terms of really being able to scale the business and figure out how to really do this well in a relationship type of business.
Well, you've added 2 more true fans today. So you're doing great.
Thank you.
Question number 3, your favorite life hack.
I think probably the point where I realized that I didn't have to trade my time for money. That somewhere around when I was in the bathroom that time, realizing if I worked 20 days a year on one thing, I wouldn't have to work 240 days on another. I think that was probably it. That stunned me to my core.
Yeah, just rethinking life. I love that. And also that ties into your answer on your favorite article of all time with 1,000 True Fans. It's just looking at the world a little differently and also building those relationships. I read that article many, many times. I was introduced to it through the Tim Ferriss show, and it's just so powerful. So yeah, I'm completely on board. All right, Vincent, question number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
Oh, man. We need a whole nother show for this one. Okay, in the past, man, what hurt was leaving $13,000 worth of camera gear on the side of the road and leaving it there. And when I was broke, that was hard. But the biggest probably one right now is probably not investing in Bitcoin back in 2015 when I looked at it and I was thinking about investing, and now I look at the numbers. I'm like, yeah, that's probably a pretty big mistake that I made, but who knew?
Yeah, who knew indeed. I think we all have that, right? My favorite one is I almost bought a couple thousand shares of Priceline when I graduated from college. And I think at that point, it was the .com bust, and it was like $1 a share. Now it's well over $1,000 a share. So yeah, I think about that. But you can't cry over spilled milk, right?
No, try not to think about those things, because think about all the things you would have invested in that tanked. So
right, exactly. So yeah, not too bad. So all right, the advice you would give your younger self.
Do not stop. Don't stop, and don't listen to the cynics. If I would have listened to what the advice everybody was giving, most people were giving me, I never would be here right now. I would have a job.
With a 10% raise.
With a 10% raise. Or if I wasn't laid off at this point.
That's awesome, man.
All right, Vincent, we have a bonus question. We kind of changed it up a little bit. It used to be, what was your favorite purchase on Amazon.com? But I really came up with this question to focus on, this is a financial independence show. And we all talk about, saving money, cutting expenses, et cetera. But has there been anything particularly impactful that you've purchased in the last year or two that you look back and say, wow, that was a really good idea?
Okay. Yeah. I bought a ticket to FinCon and I got to hang out with you guys. And now we're talking here. So that was it.
That's awesome. I love it, man.
What a great answer. Relationships. That's what makes the world go round, right?
And we didn't talk about it very much in this, but that we could have done a whole thing on relationships. That is the key to this. It's not about the money. It's about building relationships, real relationships. It's such a huge part of this. I can't emphasize enough.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, we'd be happy to have you back on just to talk about that, because I constantly harp on that here. And I think people are probably tired of hearing just me talk about it. Relationships are everything, but not the glad-handing networking garbage. It's true human connection. And like you said, you give first. You give. You help people. You're genuine. People they latch onto that. They see that you're a real person who is not just looking out for themselves, not worrying how it's going to impact them, or, they're looking for that connection. And we all crave it, and probably more so in this digital age, right?
Yep. First of all, nobody does it. Hardly anybody does it. And second of all, people ask me an inner look, what do you do every day? I spend half of my workday simply on relationships with no end game. I reach out to 20 people a day, messaging or email. I'll call a couple of people a day. I will leave reviews for people's books or products. That's what I do with half of my day when I'm working. And that's how I start. That's the hour of giving, Jonathan, you read in the book. That's how I start my day. It leads to the amount of work that it's led to, the amount of connections that it's led to. Because first of all, I try to tell people, how often do you get a thank you card handwritten in the mail? It's pretty rare. How often do you send them out? It's probably pretty rare. Can you imagine how much you'll stand out in this day and age if you started doing stuff like that? My buddy Ken, who's in my mastermind, Ken Hoops, he starts every day writing out 10 to 20 thank you notes to people in his community. His business is booming simply because of the gratitude that he gives back towards the people that are already in there. He's not worried about acquiring new clients. If you serve your clients really well and you give, they're going to tell people about it. And I don't know how this isn't a bigger part of the business world right now, because that is the number one key to what we've been able to do.
Thank you so for coming on and being so selfless with your time and with your story, being so vulnerable in your book. I can't wait to just find out more about where you're headed. It just sounds like there's so much to learn from the action that you've taken and the action that you're going to be taking. So congratulations, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure.
And to our audience, thank you so much for taking the time to listen, for being a part of our community. If you want to support us, here are 4 easy ways. 1, leave us an iTunes review. If you want to do that, just go to chooseify.com/iTunes. 2, use our page to sign up for travel credit cards. If you want to travel the world with miles and points instead of your hard-earned dollars, then just go to chooseify.com/cards and get started today. 3, if you're working on the milestones of FI, set up a personal capital account to track your progress and use our affiliate link. It's completely free, and just go to chooseify.com/PC. P as in Paul, C as in cat. And 4, and most importantly, find your friends, coworkers, and family members who might be open to this message and tell them about the podcast. Have them start with episode 38, The Why of FI, and right behind that, have them go listen to episode 21, The Pillars of FI. It is a fantastic starting place. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.